everybody, and welcome to this special Labor Day edition of Ask Shane Anything. I'm Shane Satterfield. I put the Shane and Ask Shane Anything, and you can absolutely ask me just about anything you want for this show. This show happens because some of you guys and girls are pledging at $7 or more per month at that Ask Shane tier at patreon.com/SIFTD. If you like the show, you like what we're doing at SIFTD, head on over there, give us a pledge. That would be sweet. Hope you guys are excited for Labor Day weekend. I know I am. We have more great questions for this week's episode. Let's get to them. All right, our first question this week, of course, comes from Kevin. What was your game of the show for Gamescom 2025? Which games went up in hype and which ones went down? Well, I wish I could be giving these picks from the perspective of someone who was there and actually played these games. That's a big part of it for me. Covering conventions is having the chance to actually play the games and figure out which ones play well versus the ones that look great and look like they may play well. So I'm going to have to live vicariously through the journalists who were there and take their word for it on some of these games. So to me, hands down, game of the show, Resident Evil Requiem. It was playable there for the press. There was a 10-15 minute demo. That's since been released. You can watch it. That game, it makes me a little bit nervous that Capcom's Resident Evil team feels like it has to have a Mr. X or a Nemesis presence in every Resident Evil game now. Lady Dimitrescu, obviously, was a recent one. They've done remakes of Resident Evil 3 and other games. I don't feel like they need to have something constantly chasing you through the game at all times. However, I will say this. The creature in Resident Evil Requiem is probably the scariest of all of them. So while I'm a little reticent to reward it for that because I don't like that it has to be in every Resident Evil game, that creature's pretty freaking scary. So just for my personal taste, I love horror games, I love horror movies, I love Resident Evil. The game looks like it's coming together, it's not far away, there was a playable demo. So for me, Resident Evil Requiem was the game of the show. Now let's talk about some games that were risers and fallers for me, which means that you're talking about games that we already knew about, so it can't be like debuts like the Halloween game or whatever. One riser for me that I knew about before the show started is the new Hellraiser game. Some of the reports coming out about that game from Gamescom, I'm like, holy cow, hold on. It sounds like they're not pulling any punches, and I appreciate that because to me, that's what the Hellraiser franchise was in an era of all these 80s slasher horror movies where, you know, a lot of them were kind of corny and campy and actually kind of funny if you watched them. Hellraiser was like, it's like our stuff is dead serious. And so for me, the Hellraiser franchise was a breath of fresh air for the horror movie genre back in the day. It looks like the game might do the same thing. Now, I don't want to say gratuitous gore is enough to get a game over on me. That's definitely not the case. It's not really about that. It's more about the atmosphere and things like that that the press have talked about that they saw at Gamescom based on the demo that was there. So the Hellraiser game is a riser for me for sure. Another riser for me is Kirby Air Riders for Switch 2. I just talked about this in Game Face, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. It had been a long time since I played sort of the predecessor for that game on GameCube, and I had forgotten pretty much almost everything about it. I didn't review it back in the day, so I'd only played like a little bit of it. So I'd kind of forgotten what it was like, and while this game is pretty true to that GameCube original, it reminded me about how kind of innovative the driving stuff is in the game, because while it is a driving game, it's almost kind of like a fighting game at the same time. It's very unique and very different, and it was a game that I had kind of written off because when I first saw it, I was like, it doesn't look that good. I mean, I'll just say that right now. The graphics in it are pretty mediocre. So when I first saw it, I was like, I'm not all that excited for it, but now that I've learned about it and how the game actually plays, I'm definitely more excited for it, so my hype definitely went up for that. Hype down My hype, and this isn't just from Gamescom, my hype has gone down for Metroid Prime 4 like big time. They showed a demo of that game when they debuted Switch 2 at the big events in New York and LA. And I remember I saw that demo and I was pretty disappointed in it. Because there's just like, it's just too much like a typical sci-fi shooter. There's way too many like humans around. And I do realize that Metroid Prime 3 had started kind of skirting in that direction. But I didn't think that they'd go full bore in Metroid Prime 4. And look, I could be wrong. They could be showing the early areas of the game when you're around civilization and eventually you're off on some far-flung planet and it's just you. It could be. I'm just saying, based upon what was shown at Gamescom, because they showed the same demo at Gamescom. So based upon what was shown at Gamescom, I'm kind of disappointed and a little bit nervous about Metroid Prime 4. I think we're going to get its release date here pretty soon, but that's definitely a downer for me from Gamescom. Another riser for me is Call of Duty Black Ops 7. I think a lot of people were wondering what was going to be up with that game after the big Battlefield 6 beta, and everybody's really hyped about Battlefield 6, and I am too. But I'm also very hyped for Call of Duty Black Ops 7. A lot of the stuff that I saw that's going to be in the campaign, I wish were in the multiplayer, and I get that a lot of you don't like the jetpack thing because it makes you have to learn something new. I personally love it. I like all new movement options, so some of the stuff that I saw in the campaign for Black Ops 7 looked really fun. I also think a 4-player cooperative campaign in Call of Duty could be a ton of fun, and again, Black Ops campaigns really go all over the place. There's like that top-down stuff that they show that looked like Smash TV. So anyway, I'm excited for both Battlefield 6 and Call of Duty Black Ops 7, and Gamescom definitely helped with Black Ops 7. And then for my final downer, I'm going to have to go with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. This game has been in development for forever and ever. And while a lot of times that ends up resulting in a game that's half-baked somehow and not quite as good as you dreamed even after all those years of development and all that money spent on it, in this case, that is the case. It looks very mediocre, and I do understand it's been in development for a long time, and it's tough to kind of keep updating its technology every time it gets passed on to a new developer or whatever, but it looks dated. It looks like a game that's been in development for a long time. There was also some initial pushback on the fact that they locked 2 classes behind paid DLC, and now they're backtracking on that. To me, that's a game that I've been excited for a really long time, and now that it's really close to being released and I'm kind of seeing the final form of it, Okay, our next question comes from Lashik. Shane, I was wondering if you could give us a rundown of your favorite non-gaming magazines, past or present, probably past. When I was younger, I was more into bikes than skating, but I checked out skating stuff too. I remember vividly that Transworld Skateboarding was better than any of the bike mags. Were you a fan of that one? So Lashik, back in the day when I was a skater, first of all, I just want to say I hung out with the bikers because when I was young and skating, it wasn't very big. And it also had kind of fallen off from its height in the mid-'80s or whatever. And so the bikers and the skaters kind of had to band together because we were kind of like counterculture alternative folks, and there weren't a lot of us in most of the schools in rural U.S. So I hung around with a lot of bikers back in the day. Anyway, you have brought up a point of discussion among skaters back during that era. Which was the better magazine? Was it Transworld Skateboarding or was it Thrasher Magazine? They were two entirely different things. So Transworld, the magazine you're talking about, was really polished, glossy, used great paper, great printing, the photography was superior. Thrasher was kind of like the culture-based skateboarding magazine. It was more about like punk rock and the alternative lifestyle, a lot more lifestyle stuff in that. And then eventually you saw kind of the mashup of those two was Big Brother magazine, where it had the punk rock attitude, but still kind of the glossy look of Transworld. So I read all those magazines. I had a script for Thrasher. I never had one for Transworld. I was a punker. I was a punk skater punk. I preferred Thrasher over Transworld, but I had a lot of respect for Transworld as well. Other magazines, non-skating. There was this magazine from Europe called The Face. I don't know if people from Europe even remember it. To you guys, it was probably just some other magazine like NME or whatever. To us, The Face was a glimpse into culture that had yet to come to America. So that's where I first started learning about rave and electronic music and acid house and all that kind of stuff. The whole acid house thing in 1998 in the UK. We lived vicariously through the Face magazine, learning about that scene. Alternate, The Prodigy, all the groups that were coming up during that whole period in England and the UK. The Face was how we figured out what was coming music-wise to America. It also had all the indie bands that we loved from Europe in it, so I read The Face religiously. And really, if you read The Face, you were a cut above most of the people in the United States as far as knowing what was going on with the music scene, the kind of alternative culture scene. So The Face was another favorite magazine of mine back in the day. All right, question number 3 comes from the Big Smoke. What do you make of the Switch 2 launch? I was very excited for it. I think, like most people, I had assumed Nintendo would have a fantastic first-year lineup since it hadn't released much since Tears of the Kingdom. How do you feel about the lackluster launch lineup, disappointing screen, and bad performance for last-gen games like Elden Ring? Well, going back to Kevin's question about fallers and risers from Gamescom 2025, I would say that probably Elden Ring for the Switch 2 was the biggest faller from Gamescom because it was revealed that it just runs like crap on Switch 2. That's a shocker because Cyberpunk 2077 runs on the Switch 2. So here's the thing, I don't blame the performance stuff so much on Nintendo as I do on the developers. From Software should have never shown Elden Ring in public in the state that it's in on Switch 2. That is From Software's mistake. So I don't blame Nintendo for that. Nintendo created its hardware. Everybody knows the specs, what it can do. It's up to the developers to work around that and make stuff that looks good. And it's already been proven that games that look far superior to Elden Ring can run okay on Switch 2. So I don't really blame that on Nintendo's hardware as much as the developers who are working on Elden Ring for Switch 2. But there's no denying that Switch 2 still, obviously, isn't as powerful as PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X, but how can you expect that to be the case? It's a handheld. People forget that. I don't think it's fair to compare Switch or Switch 2 to these other consoles. You know what you're getting into. You know it's a handheld, you know it's a hybrid, that it's not as powerful. I think we should allow for that in our evaluations of what Nintendo's doing with Switch 2. So the power tech of it all, I'm actually kind of impressed with it. I didn't think it would be able to run Cyberpunk 2077. I really didn't. So I'm surprised. I thought we'd be getting games like that playing in the cloud or something like that. So the tech doesn't bother me that much. However, the lack of software does bother me a lot. I've talked about this on this show. I've talked about it on Game Face. I'm going to talk about it again right here. What the hell? You're right. Nintendo's output after Tears of the Kingdom was pathetic. Almost everything that came out for Switch after that were just remasters, remakes of old games, reworks, things like that, or little projects that they were working on. Nothing big, which was fine at the time because we were like, that's okay. If you're pausing development on Switch 1 so that once Switch 2 launches, we're going to have this bounty of awesome games to play, I'm cool with that. That has not been the case. We got, obviously, Mario Kart World at launch. We got Donkey Kong Bonanza after that, like a month later, which I think is great. Those are two really, really good games at launch, which is okay. But now, look at what we're getting. We're getting things like Dragon Drive, and one of the other exclusive games for Switch 2 is the Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which should have been like a free app. So I agree with you, man. All we got left for the rest of the year at this point is the Kirby game I talked about earlier, Kirby Air Riders, Metroid Prime 4, we're assuming is still coming out this year, and then Pokemon Legends Z to A, which is also coming for Switch 1. So really, just two big Switch exclusives left for the year, and then we don't know anything about Switch 2. So I agree with you, man. The software output for this is very concerning. What the hell has Nintendo been doing for the last, 2 years for software development? I don't know. I'm as taken aback as you by that. I don't know what's going on there. I'm really flummoxed by it. So, as far as the bad screen, first of all, I don't play in handheld mode that much. I have tried handheld mode on Switch 2. I actually think the screen looks great. Now, I realize that maybe one of the bigger things that people bring up is that Nintendo kind of promised 120 frames on the console, and that hasn't happened. That's only working on the screen so far. I don't know if that's going to get fixed. Probably not. So that's probably another disappointment. But really, the biggest issue with Switch 2, and really the thing that matters the most about any console, is the software. And that's the problem right now with Switch 2. Okay, our last question for this week, and for our Labor Day weekend episode, comes from Don Lionheart. can we expect a return to the separate video reviews you were doing for a while as part of the Sifted refresh? I really enjoyed that format and their separate nature from GameFace. I don't remember hearing anything about why they went away, and it seems things are back to the old 3 hours plus GameFace format now. How come? Well, Don Lionheart, you're not wrong. I haven't really addressed this or talked about it at all because it wasn't like I made a decision or anything like that or drew a line in the sand. I'll just be honest with you. I've spent 3 days editing those. Literally almost a full works week of hours to edit one of those. So I was like doing my normal stuff that I have to do because believe me, I got stuff down to the science, down to the minute to get everything done every week for Sifted. So this was extra that I tossed on top. But if it could pay off, it was worth it for me. And it didn't pay off. Nothing happened with our Patreon. It didn't go up. It actually went down, believe it or not. Like, my wife started to complain again. She did that when I used to do Good Morning Gaming because I was taking up my nights. I am at capacity. And I can get stuff done fast, but I am at capacity. So when I take on extra stuff like a podcast like Good Morning Gaming, or I take on these huge reviews that we did, that's taking away from my free time and my time with my wife. And my wife is just at the point where she's like, Shane, you already work like 70 hours a week. Like, what are you doing? She's right. So I'm not saying they're gone for good. Like, maybe some of the bigger games in the fall we'll do them for, but there is no way I'm doing them anymore for anything less than like AAA, Quad A. It's just not worth it. We also put them up on YouTube, and the algorithm there just buries our stuff. So, all right, that's it for this week's edition of Ask Shane Anything, and the last time I have to be on camera before I leave for my short Labor Day vacation back on the East Coast. I hope everybody in America that's watching this, you have some kind of a cookout or something fun to do over Labor Day. We all work so hard. I really hope that all you guys will take a little bit of time off and enjoy the Labor Day weekend. I know I'm going to. So thanks to everybody who asked questions. Head on over to sifted.net and ask me some. There's a link in the header there. And also thanks to anyone who's pledging anything, especially the people who are pledging at that $7 Ask Shane tier at patreon.com/sifted. That's why this show happens. So have a great, safe weekend. Don't drink and drive. And I'll see you guys next week. And don't forget, sleep is for the dead. Play games instead.